Kia ora everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Today we've got a very special wānanga for you presentation. We're joined by Keith Holswich from Ngāti Rahiri, hapū in Te Atiawa. I'm going to hand over to Keith shortly, but just before, if you have any pātai, any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. This session's being recorded, so it'll be made available on our YouTube channel in a week or two, along with all of our other, we have about 30 or so recordings there now over the past couple of years, and I'll put a link to that YouTube channel on the chat for you. If Keith's kōrero looks interesting, and if you've got kōrero of your own, we'd be really keen to hear from you if you'd be willing to share your journey as well, just like Keith's going to in today's presentation. So yeah, it'd be great to hear from you, and I'm going to hand over to you now, Keith.
Thank you, Dwayne. Kia ora wānau. By way of introduction, ko Tokomaru te waka, ko Taranaki te maunga, ko wāhi te awa, ko te Atiawa te iwi, ko Ngāti Rahiri te hapū, ko tūmarangi te kakati te tupuna, ko Stockman me Marsh na wānau, ko Keith Holswich taku ingoa, tēnā koutou, kia ora ngā tātou. My name's Keith Holswich, and I'm Ngāti Rahiri. I retired a few years ago after being in the land surveying profession for 51 years. And today I've been asked to describe the ins and outs of our hapū GIS system that we have christened our Kete Mātauranga, our traditional basket of knowledge. The objective of this presentation is simply to inform anyone who may not consider a GIS as a useful tool, as indeed it is. To those who believe in setting up a GIS is too onerous, it is not. And to show that if we as a hapū can implement such a system, others can do so also. Presentation will last about 30 minutes. There will be hands-on GIS examples and leaving lots of times for questions at the end. It'll be most certainly easier to follow the presentation if you use your computer rather than a phone. You should be seeing the presentation of the GIS implementation. Can you see that, Dwayne?
Yep, looking good, mate.
Okay. Today, our presentation will cover a bit of background and history to our GIS, why we set it up, what information we have, several case studies, what went right and what went wrong, and I can assure you there's more wrongs than rights, bit of a summary, and there'll be lots of times for questions at the end. If I go into a bit of a background to our GIS, my first involvement with the GIS commenced in 1996 when Te Atiawa purchased GIS software to complete maps and plans regarding the iwi treaty settlement, and I was part of the Land Claim Committee. Unfortunately, the settlement project stalled. However, I managed to borrow the GIS software and started fiddling around with it for our hapū use. Moving forward, we then used the GIS for the 1998 New Plymouth District Council wāhi taonga survey, very short project, where we used a GPS system to identify our historic sites. Now, this was a first for New Zealand at the time, and when complete, the data was added to the district plan. In 2007, Council decided to review this project, recognising that sites were simply not dots on a landscape, they had extents around them. And when we completed that project, we as a hapū initiated 2 plan changes with Council, where all our updated information was once again added to the district plan. Between 2009 and 2014, the GIS was constantly used during the resurrected Te Atiawa Treaty settlement process. but at all times I continued to fiddle with the GIS for hapū use. This involved gathering as much information that I could via my surveying work and through the Atiawa land claims. In the end, we had a serious problem though. And that problem was that much of the information had just been stored willy-nilly into the GIS, so a complete rethink was necessary to store all the information in a more structured way. And also at that time, the GIS software and the PC I was running it on was so old that it was struggling to keep up with the amount of information we had. Something had to happen. And the real catalyst for upgrading our GIS came in 2021. And it was at this time that a large number of petrochemical developments were happening within our rohe. And as discussed, our GIS had become much more than just historic sites and a bit of land information. The petrochemical companies, though, were appreciating how we were using our GIS to provide them with timely and accurate data, but our systems were struggling. So when a particularly large petrochemical plant appeared to us for us to consider in 2021, we felt that our system simply would not cope. So we went to the petrochemical company and says, hey, look, why don't you donate us a GIS system that we can use to give you a timely and more accurate response? And surprisingly, they agreed straight away. And with that and additional generous donations from companies in Australia and New Zealand, we were able to upgrade our GIS to provide all the necessary information required when dealing with those petrochemical projects. And the big bang for us, so to speak, came in 2022 when the New Plymouth District Council commenced their revision of the district plan. And we became involved with every aspect of that procedure over 12 months. And we used our GIS constantly to demonstrate to the planning commissioners what our concerns were and our visions were for our hapū. In the end, we didn't get everything we wanted, but we got a lot thanks to our GIS use. So if we go now to what data have we now got and where we get it all from, and in no particular order, this is the information that we've got in our GIS systems. We got archaeological assessments. There's been so much development in our rohe that in most cases, archaeologists write reports, hugely important. We've got all the information of our rivers and streams to go in there. Any resource consent that comes over our table gets put into our GIS. Any story we have about our people is put into the GIS. Any photograph we can get from anybody and everybody goes into the GIS. The Māori Land Court data, we have full records of all the land dealings with our land since 1866. New Zealand Archaeological Association site records of all historic sites. This was the basis to the work that we started, and then we included all our information on top of those site records. The Takutai Moana claim, that gave us the impetus to go and collect all the information about our reefs, all about where the old fishing grounds were. All the videos, any video we can lay our hands on, we put it into the GIS, whether it's television shows, whether it's our own videos, whether it's our drone footage, we put it into the GIS. The wāhi taonga, that's where it all started. And we keep updating that at all time. Survey and topographical maps and plans. I managed to secure all of the survey plans for our rohe. Unfortunately, these are not freely available at this stage. Hopefully they will be in the near future. Absolutely vital for giving historical backgrounds to the work that we do. And also of importance to us are aerial photographs. And we have selected aerial photographs from 1945 through to today that we use in our GIS on a constant basis. I'll now switch the screen over to our GIS system, and please let me know if this doesn't work. Hopefully we can get it going.
It's
What should
looking
be
good.
on the- Yeah, what should be on the screen? This is the splash screen that we use for our GIS, and it basically welcomes everyone to our GIS system, and most importantly, acknowledges and thanks all of those people who have helped us set our GIS system up. That's the least we can do for the tremendous amount of information I've given us. Off screen, I've got a little program here which allows me to zoom in and out to various areas. That is the area of our hapū. For those who know North Taranaki, you can see the Waitara area, Uranui, and we go down as far as Tarata in the south. And there's a piece out the side, Matariko, which is another piece of our area as well. By far, the most of the information we have is within that area. A lot of the consents that we do involve the area of North Taranaki around all the petrochemical developments in the area. We've got well sites. Here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 well sites, a methanol producing plant, and an offshore oil and gas producing plant. So there's always consents for pipelines, for anything in that area. So that's where most of our information comes from. The yellow dots are our historic sites. The red and white dots are regional council consents for water and land use. And you can see offshore the extents of our reefs, which came from a oceanographic survey carried out a few years ago. And if we zoom in slightly more, once we start getting into the area of Turangi, which is my family's old hunting grounds, we then start getting our historic sites are starting to have names on them. We've got current land boundaries with their legal descriptions. The green, red, and blue numbers are survey plans, and we can click on any one of those plans and get the information. And along the coast, you'll see little icons. If it's a film icon, we can click on that and get a video. Anything that's got the information we can click on that and get information. All of these points have got data attached to them. And if we go down to this area down here, there's a little urupa called Puketapu. This is our family urupa, Puketapu here. And so we can zoom right in using all of this data that we've got. I'll work on the side. We can switch on our 1950 aerial photographs, and there's the same information with a 1950 aerial photograph rather than today's photograph. So if you look, and I hope you can see on the left-hand side, the data pane, the pane on the side, this is where we've categorized all the information that we use. And up the top we have, oh, hang on, I'll just zoom out a bit. My apologies. Resource consents. Any resource consent that we get in gets chucked into here. And all of these magenta boxes you can see around here are consents that we've had to deal with, whether they're land use consents, subdivision consents, any consent that's not directly associated with the petrochemical companies is in this particular folder. Our historic sites, you can see them on the screen. We've also got our silent files, and these are files that you can see I'm showing them there, where there's family urupa, and we don't generally make that information public. A whale gets washed ashore, we bury the whale. We don't want anyone knowing where that whale is. It's in our system. I'll switch it off before you look too closely. Takutai Moana, anything at all to do with the coastline is in another category. And that includes all our reef areas, any videos we may have. And if you want to know where the best paua in Taranaki are there, I'll switch it off before you look too closely. And kina, you want to know where the kina are, we've got all the kina there. And anyone that goes up to our reefs, we keep asking them, when you go to the reef and come back, let us know what you have found so we can update our maps all the time of where the kina, the mussels, the paua are all the way through. Te Manaro Te Wai. This is where we store all the information regarding our rivers and streams. We've got one thing that we did do is that we went back to the 1950 aerial photographs and plotted all our rivers and streams from those photographs rather than use today's one. And the importance of that is when there is a resource consent that comes to us, we specifically ask if our lands can be regenerated, not just looked after, but regenerated. And so if one of our rivers and streams has been diverted and is now a straight line across a paddock, we go back to where the stream was in the 1950s and say, well, why don't you put it back where it was and regenerate it back where it was? And we're getting a lot of traction from the various companies along those lines, which is pleasing. Our environmental layers don't have much information at this stage other than the council consents. So we can click on any one of those council consents and we can see that it's a discharge permit. It's a discharge to drill, put drilling wastes onto the land, where it is, it's hard. All that information is in our system, and that all comes from the local regional council. Excuse me while I fiddle with all these.
This is pretty amazing, Keith.
Yeah. At the moment, the land, we've got two layers there, the past land and the current land. And the current land has got the white boundaries with the current legal descriptions. And we can put the addresses on if you want the addresses. What we haven't got is the local owners, because the owners change so often that it's difficult to keep up. So we don't bother with the owners of the current land at this stage. But very important to us, if I switch off the current layer and put on the past layers, we've got information that goes back to 1866 in our system. And these are important dates to us. In 1866, the Crown took some of our land and gave it to military settlers. In 1884, we were finally issued with a Crown grant. And these are the blocks of land that were given to us as a hapū. And I can click on any one of those blocks, and there's the history of that particular block of land. Land summary, history and summary, all the references we use, which is our agreements with the government, the Crown grants, the Māori Land Court information, a very detailed description of what happened with that land and how it was partitioned in the 1970s and 1920s. These original owners of that land, and every piece when it was partitioned, the land court order number, the title reference, and who it was issued to. And we've got that for every portion of our lands. So if I switch off the 1884 and put on the 1917 grants, this is the partitions that were individualized in 1917. And we've got the owners of all those blocks as at 1917. And this is one of our go-to pages when people are looking at where their family used to live. In our, I'll switch that off and put on the current. We've got this funny little miscellaneous layer, which I need to work on. And it's where we chuck everything that I don't know where it should belong. And it's basically a little history file. Every one of these little white dots has been taken from information we've found off old survey plans, whether it's a dwelling, a whare, windmills, anything like that. We just add it there for a reference, for historical reference. We know where the old racetracks were in the 1880s. There used to be a racetrack there and a training track. We know where those are. We've got petroleum permits here. All the bits and pieces of stuff. I can click on a petroleum permit and I know that that belongs to Greymouth Petroleum. It was granted in 2006, it expires in 2036, and it's for looking for oil and gas. We've got all that information. Oops. We've got strategic partners. We've identified 5 strategic partners, being the council plus 4 of the petrochemical companies. And all the information for those companies we stick in their own folder, so that when we present, we can switch off all the other folders so they don't know what other companies are doing, and we can just show on a particular folder, a particular company. A hugely important file for us is the LiDAR data. And Dwayne has touched on this in previous discussions we've had. And if I zoom into our Puki Tapu Urupara again, you can see from the LiDAR data the extent of where the old par sites were. We can see the settling ponds for the farmer. And it's tremendous data to have on any system, is this LiDAR data. And I can certainly recommend that if you get your hands on it, stick it in your GIS system. As I mentioned,
Keith, can I ask you a quick question? How did you get that for your system? Where did you get it from, and how did you put it in? Was it quite straightforward?
I got that from another iwi organisation that were doing their area, and there's a bit of work to do, but yeah, I got it through the back door, if you like, rather than doing it myself. So the details of that would have to come from the other people, but it's wonderful. We also got a set of LiDAR data from one of the petrochemical companies. So I joined the two together because there were gaps in both. We generally use the petrochemical one because it covers our area a bit more, and it's more detailed than the ones available through Land Information New Zealand. And I think the petrochemical companies did theirs about 2 years before Land Information New Zealand.
Thanks, Keith.
All of the survey plans that we've got, and we've got 1,500 survey plans covering our rohi. So I can click on any one of these plans that are in the system. Here it is, ML718. There's the survey plan from ML718, which was done in 1917, which shows the partitions of our land. So every one of these plans is available just by clicking on the dots, every one of them, and putting those together. I gathered those through my survey business. You download the positions of those plans from the Land Information New Zealand website and just simply link the two together. It probably took, I don't know, a couple of hours. We have got our maps and plans, and these are generally the plans that we overlay on top of our underlying data. And if we come down here, the first survey that was carried out on our lands was SO 359, and that was done in 1883. And so we overlay that plan, and we can see from that plan how the boundaries relate to today's boundaries. They surveyed where old whare were, where kainga were. All that information can be seen on the overlaid plans. We've got overlaid for the Crown Grant plans from 1899. So this is where we get the information for who received what piece of land during the Crown Grant period. Our topographical plans have got their own little section. There's the plan that we all recognise. That's used for just generally finding out where we are within the system. Some people find looking at this plan is much easier than looking at aerial photographs. But we're very lucky here in Taranaki that in 1926, the government started producing hand-drawn topographical plans. And there's those plans overlaid onto our system. And these 1926 plans include a wealth of information of who lived in those areas at that time, chapels, schools, the names of all the people that were living there. A wonderful, wonderful resource. I've been doing some work on the East Coast, and I note that they don't have these sort of plans. So we are very, very lucky that we have got these plans available. We come to our aerial photographs that I talked about before. We've got them for every 5 or 10 years from 1945 through to today. But by far, the majority of the work we do, we use either the 2022 aerials that are shown here, or as I showed before, the 1950 aerial photos. And the 1950s contain a wealth of information about what was there 75 years ago. So these are our go-to plans for historical information. And that's a very brief tour of what we've got in our system. And I'd like to show a couple of case studies if I can. And the first one, I'll switch off a whole bunch of stuff that we don't really need here, is how we've dealt with our historic sites. And I'll just switch off. Bear with. And we don't need our survey plans. So when we first started our GIS, this is what it consisted of. An aerial photograph with dots showing where our sites were. And that's what council used to protect our sites. Of course, that is nothing. So the first thing that we did with the council reorganisation was to put buffers around the sites. And to do that, we used an archaeologist from Auckland, Dr. Hans Barder. Hans came down with us and spent 10 days with us visiting all of these sites, mapping out the extents of each of the sites. And we did that specifically so that when we went to planning hearings, it was not us as iwi giving the information, but a professional archaeologist. And that worked out really, really well for us. Part of the council's resource consent is planning is, what do we as hapū want to do with this information now? So the first thing we did was say, right, these are our no-go areas. And they're mainly urupa, either family urupa, special positions, or our bigger urupa. And we've said to everybody, you're not going anywhere near that. If you want to do something and it's in that area, tough, go away. It's not going to happen. And everyone has come to accept that you just stay away from urupa. You don't mess with urupa. The council then said, look, if we now know the extents of the site, we will allow another 50 metres around those sites for iwi to be informed about. So we put a buffer of 50 metres around those sites. And if anything happens within that 50-metre buffer, we automatically get advised about what's happening, and we can have a say on what happens within that 50 metres. But just to be sure, we stick another 50 metre around that as well. So we've now got a 100-metre buffer around our sites. And so you can see that we've gone from points on a map to buffered areas which really can protect our sites more. So to prove, if you like, and you've always got to prove it, iwi people will know that, you've always got to prove things. If we go to our family urupa and we click on the urupa icon, all of the information we know about that site is included in this document. It's just an HTML document, and all of the information shown in blue is linked to something. So we can click on the photographs, and there's a photograph of our urupa. We can click on a 3D model that was taken from our drone survey. And I'll have to fire this up. There is a 3D model of our urupa. And we've done this for every site that we can. And these 3D models prove invaluable when you're trying to demonstrate to somebody what is actually there. Then we have videos of our sites, and most of them are drone videos. So each time we go to present somewhere, we can say to people, well, look, we've got our photographs, yes, we've got our 3D model, and here's our drone footage that we have taken of our site. Be careful, we live on the coast, and the big brown seagulls do not like drones. They'll attack them at every opportunity that they get. We were lucky that we've got oral history. Dr. Hans Bader, when he came and visited all the sites, would sit down for 5 minutes and speak about the site from an archaeological perspective. Yes, we've got our stories. He gave the archaeological perspective. We've then got the obligatory land history of every one of our sites, in this case, the 4Y block. It's currently owned by us as trustees. And of course, we've got the references. So we can go to anybody with our site information and say, it's not a dot on the map. This is what we've got. Here's our evidence. And just as an example, the data folder, every one of our sites has got the same data structure. So every site has got a place for aerial photographs. Every site has got a space for documents, for archaeological information, for speech and oral, photographs and plans. So any site, we can just download that particular site and all of the information is available on that one directory. And there's our simple HTML file, and we click on that and we can, that's where we enter all our data. It's not a technical system. It's a time-consuming system, but anybody can update the data at any time at all. So I'll shut that down. So that is how we protect our sites now. Not a dot on the map, but back it all up with all of that information that we've got there. If I can go now to a subdivision of how we consider a subdivision application. And in this particular place, we'll go to a consent here. Somebody comes to us, the land surveyor comes to us and says, we want to subdivide that land shown in magenta. So we switch on all the layers of our GIS, and I must say that generally we leave all our layers on and switch them off when we don't need them, rather than the other way around. So we put on all of our layers, we put on all of our, oh, there's nothing there, put on Te Manaro Te Wai, there's our streams. The district council says that nothing can be done within 25 metres of a stream unless they come and visit the iwi, because we got a statutory acknowledgement on our treaty settlement. So we put a 25-metre buffer around our streams. We've got all of our puna, our springs, and you'll notice that all of our streams have got springs, and so they are protected. So we put a 25-metre buffer around those as well. And then we put on our historical information that we had before. And now you can start seeing, and we'll put a buffer around the historical information. Put on our survey plans, if we want to look at all our survey plans, these are, like I say, these are normally on. And suddenly you can see that just with a few clicks of the key of the mouse, we've got at least 5 separate streams we need to look out for. 1 there, 2, whoops, 3, 4, 5. We've got 2 springs to look out for, 1 there and 1 there. We've got 3 historical points, which are where old houses were, and 1 historic site. Now, all of that took less than 5 minutes. And this used to take us hours and hours to research that information. So we bring the surveyors into our office and say, right, if you want to subdivide that land, we want you to take into account all of that information we've just shown you. And so they go away and prepare a resource consent plan of that subdivision. And what do we see? They've noted all our rivers and streams, and they've put esplanade strips beside them because we asked for it. The historic site, which was found in the swamp, is not shown because we've kept that rather silent. So everything that we asked for after showing them our GIS has been incorporated into this subdivision consent. Wonderful. It took an hour and a half over a cup of tea to do that, to get it right, so that when this came back to us for comment from the council, we simply ticked it off because everything we had asked for had been taken care of. This is an example of how something works. I'll show you an example of how something doesn't work. And if we look at this particular piece of land, all of our layers are on. It's a bit complicated, the history sites, so I'll just switch those off in the meantime. So they came to us and said, right, here's the land. We want to subdivide that land. And we look at that and say, well, the only concern we've got is a puna and a little bit of our stream, the Parahaki stream, doesn't look much at all, does it? Works quite good. However, in the consent application, they said that there's a farm milking shed here, and the effluent from that milking shed is piped to the stream, which in itself has been piped. So we go, hang on, there is no council consent for that to happen. And the only council consent that we've got is this one down here. So we click on that council consent and we notice that it's a discharge permit to land. So when they tell us that they're discharging to the stream, but they don't have a permit, it makes us a bit worried. So we go to the regional council and say, what consent is there? And the council sent us their permit. In May 2022, there was a permit to discharge dairy effluent to land. Nothing about a pipe stream, nothing about sending their effluent to the stream. So we go back to the applicant and we say to the surveyor, something's not right here. We are not going to support your proposal until you sort out those consents. And there it's sat for the last 2 years. Are we being pedantic or obstructive? Absolutely not. We're simply protecting our rivers and streams as we're entitled to do under our treaty settlement. So we don't, at this stage, there is no plan, no permit to do anything other than discharge the land, which is what they're not doing.
Yeah, just letting you know, getting some really positive feedback in the chat.
Oh, good. I'll show you now a partnership, how we've worked with our partners. And I need to switch a whole bunch of stuff off here, which is going on. I'll go to a particular site and I'll switch off a whole bunch of stuff that we don't need to see at this stage. One of our partners came to us. They wanted to do some development work within this yellow area. And this is where all the gas from North Taranaki comes ashore. It's processed in this plant. Some of it goes to Methanex to make methanol. Some of it gets shipped away all around the country. All comes through this particular area. So they say they want to do some development. Can we bring our GIS along and show them what we've got? Absolutely. So we switch on. Those red areas are our historic sites. And we say, look, do what you like, but don't go anywhere near any of those sites. But we've also got some areas of interest. And these areas that we've shown on here are the old streams. And we know there's been lots of artifacts found in those streams. This little bush area has been there forever and a day. We've got concerns about the wetlands over the other side. So we say to them, look, please stay away from those. And there was a little archaeological site here that was found during the site setup. We then put our 50-metre buffer around those sites, and then we go to the companies, all right, that's what you've got. So if we look straight away at that, we'd really like to be involved with anything you do on the site. And they say, that's fine, welcome aboard. So now we've got this wonderful working relationship with one of our strategic partners because they took the time to look at the information we had on our GIS system to understand our concerns and to involve us with every step of the process. We're aware of projects coming up on the site 2 years before they actually happen. So that shows you an example of how you can work with these petrochemical companies. We've been asked a question. A petrochemical company has given you a GIS system. Have you sold out to them? Absolutely not. Our hapū position is we'd rather not have any petrochemical development in our rohe at all, but we understand it's going to happen. So it's far better to sit around the table with these people and give our concerns and input rather than sit outside and throw stones at them. And so far that has worked really, really well. If I can get away from the GIS and get back to my presentation, I've only got a few minutes to go. I'm not sure what the time is like.
Oh, yeah, we're good.
Right for time, are we?
I wonder if I could pop in a couple of questions, Keith.
Yeah, sure.
Various questions on here about where the data is stored and who has access to it. And my comment to a couple of folks was, I believe it's probably sitting on Keith's laptop at the moment and has backup somewhere.
It sits on the hapū laptop GIS system. I have a backup copy that I work on at home, but the main one is the hapū GIS system. And the GIS system is backed up to a NAS in the office, which is stored in the safe. Our office building is an old bank, and we have got two lockable safes. So the NAS sits in one of those safes, and every time the GIS laptop is switched on, it automatically backs up. Anytime I'm working out of my family room at home at the moment, it gets backed up to my home office. So it's backed up everywhere. There's about 4 or 5 copies keep getting backed up all around the place. The total size of all our data is 800 gigabytes, less than a terabyte. It's not big by any means. It's all stored on our computer, not on the net anywhere. So we can simply pack up our GIS computer, go to any meeting, switch it on, and all our data is there. Does that answer that question?
Yep, I think it does. Thank you, Keith. The other question one had was just about how you had made the 3D viewer. I noticed you using Autodesk, and I wondered what software or tools had you used to create that.
Okay, the original, I'll switch on a bit of a few of the layers here. Switch off the buffers. So when we use the drone to take the video, we also go over a site with downward looking cameras and go backwards and forwards over the site until we've got 400 or 500 photographs. Those photographs are then processed online through, and I don't have the name with me, I'm afraid. And that creates what's called an FBX file, which is the 3D image file. Now the AutoCAD file that we use this one here is simply a freebie from Autodesk. It's an FBX free viewer. So once the 3D image has been processed, you put it in this free viewer, and then you can view it. You can't do anything with it.
Yep.
It hasn't cost us anything to do any of that other than spend $600 on a drone.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith.
So we, as much as possible, we've used free software. I took all the hint from Holden Hohaia, who uses free software.
Yeah.
So any software that we use to process all of our information is free.
Awesome.
Any other questions at all on this?
I think that's probably covers most of them for now.
Okay.
Folks, feel free to put any further ones in there. But back to you, Keith, back to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll get back to where we were on the presentation. I've shown you some case studies. Here's the question then is what did we get right or wrong when we set up our GIS system? And what we got right, I think, and it was completely unintentional, is that we started with that small project, which was the Wāhi taonga survey in 1996. And all we did was went out with a GPS, stood in the middle of the site, took a GPS fix, and put that into the GIS. So we had an aerial image and dots on a map. And we found that pretty easy to get started. Everything improved from there, and we got more and more information. But I think having small bites of the apple rather than trying to do it all once is a recommendation I would have to give. Do small bits and pieces at a time. The other thing that worked for us was building relationships. And we built it up with local landowners by visiting the sites to show them that we weren't there to take away any property rights. We simply wanted to protect the history. And 90%, 95% of the landowners we visited were on our side. Some didn't want us stealing their land. Some didn't want us to be involved with anything like that. That's fine. Most of the farmers we visited were happy for us to visit, take photographs, fly the drone, and say, there's the site, please look after it, and they do. We built up relationships with the regional and territorial authorities. Again, You can stand outside and chuck as many stones as you like. That's not going to get you anywhere when you need any help. And then, of course, we built up the relationships with the petrochemical companies. And some of those relationships are no more than once a month having breakfast or a cup of coffee with the relevant people. And so that when we could sit at a table and say to them, we've got concerns, they would listen to us. So building up those relationships is a huge, huge part of getting information working on your GIS system. The other one thing we got right was the hapū buy-in. We got everyone from the hapū involved right from the start. The young kids were very interested in seeing how this worked, but then the older people would come along and were amazed when we started putting in the historical land information of sitting there for hours at a time, finding out the old names of the people they knew and where their land was. So we got everybody involved with that. And just remember, of course, that any GIS system is only as good as the data that you put in there and the combined input. It's not just for a few people, it's everybody's input. And the other thing I think we got right was the public consultation and the participation. And since we set up our GIS, we've taken every opportunity to participate in as many public consultations as we can. Council want to have a consultation about something, we turn up with our GIS, plug it in, and show everybody what we've got. So we've used our GIS to full advantage there for any sort of public consultation. We've presented our GIS to all the local councils, to other iwi groups, and of course to all the petrochemical companies. They all know that we now use GIS. We've got the data there. We're not making anything up. So when they come to do something, we don't invent a urupa or something like that. This is our information. You work around us and we'll be happy. So that public consultation and participation worked out really well. The next thing, of course, what didn't we get right? And one of the first things that we got wrong is that we didn't plan for the future. And I mentioned that at the start. Initially, everything we had from the GIS, we just chucked it into a data directory. Suddenly, we had this huge amounts of information that while everything was linked to the GIS, we couldn't find where it was in our system. So we had to restructure everything. And we did that in the early 2000s, 2014, I think it was, so that by 2021, we've now got a structure that we think would fit in with us going ahead 10, 15 years. We can slide any information straight into the categories. So if you're planning on a GIS, think of the future. Don't think of what you've got now. What do you want to do in the future? And we didn't get that right. The second one I've got there, appropriate hardware and software, not having any money. We struggled with outdated software and old computers for a long time. And anyone who uses old computers and old software knows how annoying that can get. And with all of our data, our 800 gigabyte of data, trying to suck that in an old computer to display, you might as well go and get a cup of coffee while you're waiting for it to display. So when the oil companies came to us and says, well, here's some money, go and buy yourself a computer. Look, it's made it so simple, so easy to use, so quick, so precise. Yeah, get the right hardware and software. Whatever software it might be, we use a software called MapInfo. There's others out there. What we didn't get right was succession planning at the start. At the start, the GIS was my baby with a few other people helping out. It's only when I retired from surveying and started looking around of who was going to take over, we realized that although a lot of people had been involved, we had not planned for succession. And so we're doing that now, which means I can't retire from this for another few years until we get some young person along. We didn't get it right. Succession planning right from the start. And the last one I've got there that we didn't get right was training and education. But I suspect mainly because when we started in 1996, not many other people were doing this work. So we were having to invent our own way of doing things. But over the last few years, I've been attending these wānanga run by Dwayne, and the information that is given out is amazing and invaluable. So I encourage everybody to do as much training and as education as you can. And I note that in August, our local council, the New Plymouth District Council, have got a 3-day GIS course for GIS wannabes. I'm going to it. The first day is basics, GIS 101. The next 2 days is all about data, how to use it, etc. By all means, attend those courses. It's free. Go along. These wānanga that are held here once a month are free. Send out the word. Get as many people as you can to come to these wānanga. Get the training and education. We didn't get it right at the start. We made a lot of mistakes. I'm thinking, just go for it. Now, the next slide is going forward, thinking back. Where are we heading and where have we been? And I think throughout this presentation, you've seen that we've got what I've called a traditional GIS. Pretty boring, 2D, few bells and whistles. It's worked for us, and I think it'll work for us for the foreseeable future. But what is the future? And I've called it the visual GIS. And I come to these wānanga on this channel, and I'm totally amazed at what Dwayne turns up with his 3D fly-throughs. That's the future, I think, for GIS. Story maps, wonderful. I'm probably too old in the tooth to get those going. Young kids are right into it. I've seen what young kids are doing with story maps. Wonderful. That's one of the futures of GIS. The other one down there is artificial intelligence. You've probably seen what Dwayne did with his aerial photograph, his black and white aerial photograph of a bay somewhere on the East Coast with a town on it. Dwayne says, get rid of the town, put it in bush and make it coloured. What have you got? AI produces this wonderful coloured image of a bush-covered hill. That's going to be great for future use, but you still need to keep the data from old. And that's what I've got down the bottom there. Data is king. AI is not going to get you the ownership of the lands from 1866. AI is not going to show you where your old sites are. Not at this stage. AI is not going to get you titles for the property or survey plans yet. So whatever method you use, whether it's traditional, whether it's visual, whether it's AI, just keep in mind that data is the king of everything. I've only got a couple of slides to go, so I'll keep that going. People have asked how long did all this take? Well, I've told you I started in 1996, but it's only really been since 2021 that we have gone into this in a very serious way. So it's taken us 4 years to get where we are. We had a lot of background going before, but yeah, seriously for 4 years. Setting up a GIS is available to everyone. We've shown how we did it. Now, if we can do it, anyone else can do it. And once it's set up, I can assure you it becomes an integral part of any environmental or consenting practice that you do. And for us, it's indispensable in any daily operation that we do concerning our rohi. And in summary, I've got to acknowledge all of those who are involved, especially those external organisations who have contributed. And in particular, I'd like to thank Todd Energy, Taranaki, who supplied us with the wonderful GIS system. Critchlow Geospatial from Wellington, who provided us or put us in touch with Australia for the software. Quick Map out of Wellington, who've supplied us with plans, data as much as we wanted, and especially precisely from Australia, who kindly give us a license to operate our map info for free each year, as long as we don't use it for commercial purposes, which of course we don't. So that is how we've set it up. That's where we think it's going in the future. Those are the people who have helped us out. Ngā mihi nui. I'm back to you, to Dwayne. I'm happy to take any questions about what I've presented here. I'll stop sharing my screen and pass it back to you.
Kia ora, Keith. I would just like to say that has probably been one of the most impressive presentations we've had on the Ngā Poutama series for a long time. It was amazing. And when you get to have a look at the feedback on the chat, you'll get what I mean. So, yeah, just amazing, Keith. Absolutely amazing. I had no idea.